It was midnight inside the Grand Dragon Nursery Hall, a place few humans had ever seen. The hall stretched like a vast cavern of crystal and steel, filled with the soft glow of protective lights that shimmered against the walls. It was meant to be a safe home for the youngest of dragonkind, where tiny hatchlings could sleep, play, and grow without fear. Yet tonight, the silence was broken by the echo of alarms. The sound was not sharp or violent, but steady, a mechanical pulse that filled the empty corridors. It was the kind of alarm that spoke not of danger, but of malfunction. To the dragon caretakers, it was a small matter, but by mistake, or perhaps by hidden design, the system had called upon a human to fix it. His name was Daniel, a mechanic by trade, and he had never imagined he would be called into a place like this. Daniel stepped carefully into the nursery hall, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. His eyes darted around nervously as the heavy doors closed behind him with a thud that seemed louder than it should have been. He had heard stories of dragons, stories of their power, their pride, and their disdain for human weakness. Yet here he was, alone in the very heart of their nest. His hands carried only a small repair kit, filled with tools, wires, and patches for machines he barely understood. He muttered to himself, "Just fix the problem and get out. Easy job." But his own voice sounded strange and hollow in the vast chamber. Then he heard it, a sound that pierced through the steady alarm and froze him in place. A soft, trembling cry. Not the cry of a machine, but the cry of something alive. Daniel followed the sound, his steps slow, his heartbeat heavy. He turned a corner and there, in the center of a glowing cradle, was a dragon hatchling no bigger than a large dog. Its scales shimmered faintly, glowing like embers in the dark, but its eyes were wet with tears. In front of the little creature lay a toy, if it could be called that. It was a strange, alien object, half crystal, half metal, shaped like a sphere with etched lines that pulsed with faint blue light. But the light was broken now, flickering weakly, and each time it failed, the hatchling whimpered louder. Daniel froze, unsure of what to do. He had repaired engines, ships, and broken panels before, but never had he been asked to face a crying dragon. The hatchling sniffled, nudged the toy with its small snout, and let out another high-pitched cry. Daniel's instincts, those very human instincts, kicked in. He knew the sound of a child in distress. And though this was not a human child, the feeling was the same. He took a slow breath, kneeling down carefully so as not to frighten the little one. Hey, it's okay," he whispered softly, though he doubted the creature understood his words. But tone mattered, and something in his calm voice made the hatchling pause. Its cries softened, and its large, glowing eyes blinked at him with curiosity. Daniel set his repair kit down and picked up the broken toy, turning it in his hands. It was light, almost too light, and filled with lines of glowing circuits that reminded him of veins beneath skin. He shook his head slightly. "You're crying because of this? All right. Let's see what I can do." His fingers moved quickly, pulling small tools from his kit, unscrewing panels, and sliding wires aside. He had no manual, no guide, and no idea how dragon technology truly worked. But he trusted his hands, the same hands that had fixed dozens of broken toys for his nieces and nephews back on Earth. Sometimes, he thought, the heart understood things the mind could not. The hatchling tilted its head, watching him work. Each time the toy flickered with weak light, its tail swished hopefully. When the light died again, it let out a soft whine. Daniel smiled faintly. "Don't worry, little one. I'll get it working again." His voice was steady now, filled with quiet determination. The hatchling crept closer, resting its head near his knee, its breathing calming as it listened to the gentle rhythm of his words and the click of his tools. For a moment, it was only the two of them, the mechanic and the hatchling, sharing a fragile bond of trust. But what Daniel did not know was that they were not alone. High above, hidden in the darkness of the hall's balcony, shadows stirred. Unseen eyes watched every movement, every word, every gesture of kindness. They belonged not to a guard, nor to a servant, but to the one being no human could afford to ignore, the Dragon Emperor himself. The great ruler sat silently, his massive form cloaked in darkness, his golden eyes glowing faintly as he leaned forward. He had not expected this human to respond with care. He had not expected patience. He had not expected gentleness. Yet here it was unfolding before him. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, though he could not say why. He thought perhaps it was the cold air of the hall, or the weight of silence pressing down on him. But deep inside, something told him he was being watched. He pushed the thought aside, focusing only on the toy and the small life beside him. He adjusted a wire, soldered a crack, and pressed a glowing shard back into place. The toy flickered again, brighter this time. The hatchling's eyes widened, and it let out a delighted chirp, its tail thumping against the floor. Daniel chuckled softly. Almost there. Just a little more. The human thought he was alone. He was wrong. The Dragon Emperor's gaze did not waver, and the silence of the hall was filled with a tension that only he could feel. For while Daniel worked with kind hands, the Emperor's mind was already turning. Was this human different from the others? Was he to be ignored? Or was he to be watched more closely? And so, as the hatchling leaned happily against Daniel's side, and the toy began to glow once more, the stage was set for something far greater than a simple repair. Destiny had entered the nursery hall that night. The human did not know it, but every choice, every action, and every word had already drawn the attention of a ruler who could change the course of his life forever. The human smiled at the hatchling, never realizing that in the shadows above, the golden eyes of the Dragon Emperor glowed brighter with interest. The human thought he was alone. He was wrong. The soft blue glow of the toy flickered back to life, casting little waves of light across the nursery floor. The dragon hatchling chirped happily, nudging the toy with its tiny snout as though it had been reunited with a lost friend. Daniel leaned back on his knees, wiping the sweat from his forehead. His hands smelled faintly of burnt wires and heated crystal, but the job was done. At least he thought it was. For a moment he let himself smile. He had expected the night to be nothing more than a frustrating repair task in a place where he didn't belong. Instead, he had somehow found himself fixing a broken toy for a crying dragon child. The hatchling inched closer to him, its bright eyes following his every move. It gave a soft rumble in its throat, a sound almost like a purr. Daniel blinked, surprised, and gave a nervous laugh. "What? You're not afraid of me anymore, huh?" he asked gently. The hatchling tilted its head, its scales glimmering faintly in the light, and tapped its claw softly against his boot. It was not a threat, not a warning, but almost an invitation. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen dragonkind from a distance before, always towering, proud, and dangerous. But this little creature was different. This one was vulnerable. This one needed him. The toy hummed weakly in the hatchling's claws. Daniel frowned and picked it up again, inspecting the wires. "Not perfect yet," he murmured. "Needs a bit more work." The hatchling whined softly as though protesting, but Daniel shook his head with a patient smile. "Don't worry, little one. I'll make it right. I promise." He set the toy on his lap, pulling out a different tool, and bent over it once more. His fingers moved carefully, adjusting connections and sliding crystal shards into place. Every now and then, he glanced at the hatchling, who was watching him with absolute attention, its tail sweeping the floor slowly like a pendulum. As he worked, Daniel spoke softly. His words meant more for comfort than meaning. "Back home, I used to fix toys all the time. My little niece, Emma. She would break her toys every other week. Dolls, puzzles, even her little music box. Always running to me, crying, begging me to fix them. Guess I never thought those same hands would be fixing, well, a dragon's toy." He chuckled softly to himself. The hatchling tilted its head at the sound of his laughter, then leaned closer, resting its chin against his knee as though listening. For Daniel, it was strangely grounding. He had walked into this hall expecting nothing but cold metal and machinery. Instead, he found himself speaking to a creature that seemed to understand more than it should. High above, in the dark balcony, the golden eyes of the Dragon Emperor narrowed. He listened not to the human's words, but to the tone, the patience, the unguarded warmth. Dragons knew power, dominance, strength, but this was something different. The Emperor's mind measured carefully. What was this strange human offering? Comfort, care, a gentle touch instead of fear. He did not reveal himself. He would not interfere. But his curiosity deepened. Back on the ground, Daniel finished his adjustments and tapped the side of the toy. With a faint pulse, the crystal sphere glowed brighter, filling the space with steady light. The hatchling let out a sharp trill of delight, wings flapping clumsily as it danced around the glowing toy. Daniel laughed, feeling a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. The little creature circled him once, then returned, pressing its warm body against his arm in a clumsy embrace. Daniel hesitated, unsure if touching a dragon hatchling was safe or even allowed. But the hatchling didn't give him a choice. It curled against his side, clutching the glowing toy in its claws, and rumbled contentedly like a giant cat. Slowly, carefully, Daniel let his hand rest against its scales. They were warm, smoother than he expected, pulsing faintly with hidden energy. He whispered, "You're just a child, aren't you?" The hatchling chirped again, nestling closer. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady himself. He couldn't believe this was happening. Here he was, a simple mechanic, being trusted by a dragon hatchling as though he were family. He didn't know what the dragon caretakers would think, or if he'd be punished for stepping too close. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The hatchling trusted him, and he would not break that trust. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the hum of the repaired toy and the soft breaths of the hatchling as it rested beside him. Daniel leaned back against the wall, exhausted but strangely at peace. He thought of the alarms that had brought him here, the malfunction that had pulled him into this place. Felt almost like fate. Why had the system chosen him, of all people? Why not one of the caretakers or a specialist in alien tech? Was it just a glitch? Or something else? The Emperor's shadow loomed high above, still watching. His gaze had not left the human for a single moment. The ruler of dragons was not used to surprises. But tonight, he found himself intrigued. He turned to one of his silent guards, his voice low, like thunder muffled in the distance. "Do not interrupt. Let him continue." The guard bowed silently, stepping back into the shadows. Daniel yawned quietly, rubbing his eyes. The hatchling's warmth pressed against him was oddly soothing, like sitting beside a campfire. He whispered, "Guess you and I aren't so different after all. Just need someone to fix things when they break." The hatchling's tail flicked lazily as though agreeing. Daniel chuckled softly and shook his head. "I must be crazy, talking to a dragon like this." But he wasn't crazy. The bond was real. And though Daniel believed this was just a quiet, private moment, it was anything but private. Every word, every gesture, every act of patience was being measured by the most powerful being in the room. The Emperor did not smile, nor frown, but his silence was heavier than stone. He was waiting, watching, judging, and Daniel had no idea. As the hatchling drifted into a gentle sleep beside him, clutching its glowing toy like a treasure, Daniel closed his toolkit and leaned his head back against the cold wall. His eyes were heavy, but his mind was restless. Something about this night felt different. It wasn't just about fixing a broken toy anymore. Something bigger was happening, something he couldn't see. He thought he was only a visitor here by accident. But already, threads of fate were weaving around him. The Emperor's golden eyes gleamed in the dark, silent and unblinking. His thoughts were his own, but one truth had already formed in his mind. This human was not ordinary. He would be watched closely. Daniel let out a tired breath, whispering softly to the sleeping hatchling, "Good night, little one. You're safe now." But he was wrong. Safety was not guaranteed. For while the hatchling slept peacefully, the Emperor's judgment had only just begun. The nursery hall was silent again, except for the soft hum of the repaired toy and the gentle breathing of the sleeping hatchling. The glow of the crystal sphere pulsed in rhythm with the little dragon's chest, as though it shared the creature's dreams. Daniel sat beside it, leaning against the cold wall, his eyes half closed. He had meant to leave once the toy was fixed, but something held him there. Maybe it was the way the hatchling curled against his leg, trusting him completely. Maybe it was the warmth of its tiny body, or the way its small claws clutched the toy as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. For once, the mechanic felt like he wasn't just repairing machines, he was repairing hearts. But Daniel wasn't alone, no matter how peaceful it seemed. High above, in the balcony lost in shadows, the golden eyes of the Dragon Emperor never blinked. He watched the human carefully, every movement, every word from before, every gentle action replaying in his mind. This was not what he had expected from a member of a species known more for arrogance than humility. He had expected clumsy hands, impatience, or fear. Instead, he saw kindness, and it made him wonder. A whisper broke the silence. Not Daniel's, not the hatchling's. A voice in the dark. It belonged to one of the Emperor's advisors, a tall dragon elder cloaked in deep red. His tone was low, careful, yet edged with doubt. "My Emperor, why do you watch this human so closely? He is nothing. A mechanic, a servant. His kind is fragile. They are not worthy of your gaze." The Emperor did not look away from Daniel. His golden eyes glowed faintly as he rumbled, his voice slow and heavy like distant thunder. "Fragile things can surprise us. Do not speak again until I say." The elder bowed his head, silenced, but his thoughts remained sharp. To him, the idea that a human could matter in the halls of dragons was laughable. But the Emperor was not laughing. He had seen something tonight, and he was not ready to dismiss it. Daniel, of course, heard nothing of this exchange. He stretched his arms and yawned, then pulled the toy gently from the hatchling's grip to check the repairs one more time. The little creature stirred, blinking its glowing eyes, and let out a soft chirp of protest. Daniel chuckled. "Don't worry, little one. I'm not taking it away, just making sure it's working right." His voice was patient, steady, and his hands moved carefully so as not to startle the hatchling. He tested the circuits, tightened a piece, and placed it back into the hatchling's claws. The glow returned, stronger than before. The hatchling's happy trill filled the air, echoing softly in the high ceiling of the hall. Unseen, the whispering began again, not from one, but from several dragons hidden in the shadows. Guards, attendants, and advisors who had been ordered to silence could not help themselves. Their voices slithered through the darkness like smoke. Why does he show such care? Does he not fear punishment for touching what is ours? He speaks to the hatchling as though it were his kin. Perhaps he is foolish, or perhaps he knows nothing of respect. The whispers overlapped, cautious but laced with scorn. And then another voice joined them, colder, sharper. Or perhaps, it said, he is cleverer than he appears. The guards stiffened. The elder who had spoken earlier narrowed his eyes. Clever? No. To him, the human was simply naive. Yet the thought hung in the air like a dangerous scent. If cleverness was involved, then intent might be hidden behind those soft words and kind hands. Daniel, blissfully unaware, smiled as the hatchling climbed clumsily onto his lap. Its wings were still too small to carry it, but it spread them proudly as if to show him what it would one day become. "Look at you," Daniel whispered. "You don't even know how big you'll grow, do you?" His voice softened even more. "One day you'll be stronger than I can imagine. But for now, you're just a kid." The hatchling chirped happily, pressing its forehead against his chest. Daniel froze for a moment, then slowly raised his hand and stroked its scales. The warmth beneath his palm was alive, strong, and real. In the balcony above, the Dragon Emperor's claws tightened against the stone railing. Something about this simple touch unsettled him. Not in fear, but in wonder. Dragons respected strength, they valued dominance, and they cherished honor. Yet here, before his very eyes, a bond was being built without any of those things. A bond born only of trust and kindness. The whispers in the dark grew restless. Some were amused, others suspicious. One guard leaned close to another and murmured, "The human is blind to the eyes upon him. Shall we test him? Shall we reveal ourselves and see his fear?" But the Emperor's gaze swept across them, silencing their tongues at once. The golden light in his eyes burned with command. No one would disobey. Not yet. Daniel shifted, setting the hatchling gently back into its cradle. There you go. Safe and sound. He stood slowly, stretching his tired limbs, and glanced around the hall. Something about the silence pressed against him. The alarm that had summoned him was long gone, the problem solved, and yet he felt as though unseen weights rested on his shoulders. He muttered softly, "Feels like someone's watching me." His words faded into the vast space, unanswered. The hatchling yawned, curling into a ball around its glowing toy, drifting back to sleep. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. For the first time, he saw hesitation in the human, a flicker of awareness. Perhaps Daniel was not as blind as they thought. Perhaps instinct warned him of the truth, that the most powerful being in the Empire had fixed his gaze upon him. The Emperor leaned back slowly, disappearing deeper into the shadows. His voice rumbled softly to himself, almost too low for the others to hear. "He feels it. Good." Below, Daniel shook off the uneasy feeling. He gathered his tools, packed them neatly into his kit, and gave the hatchling one last glance. "Sleep well, little one. You'll be fine now." He turned toward the door, ready to leave the hall behind. But he couldn't shake the thought that lingered in the back of his mind, a whisper of doubt that refused to die. He thought he was alone here, yet some part of him knew he wasn't. High above, the whispers finally died as the Emperor raised one claw in silence. His judgment was not yet given. His curiosity was not yet satisfied. But his interest in the human had deepened. Daniel thought he was walking away from a simple repair job. Instead, he was walking deeper into the Emperor's unseen game. The hatchling slept peacefully, the toy glowing bright once more, unaware that its joy had become the reason for so many watching eyes. And in the shadows, the whispers lingered, waiting for the night when the truth would finally break. The dragon nursery was quiet, wrapped in a calm that felt almost too perfect. The hatchling slept peacefully with its glowing toy pressed against its small chest, and Daniel, standing nearby, felt a sense of relief. The alarms had stopped, the problem was solved, and for the first time since entering the hall, he believed he might finally leave. Yet just as he turned toward the exit, a sudden flicker of blue light caught his eye. He paused, frowning, and looked back. The toy in the hatchling's claws was glowing weakly again, its steady pulse breaking into uneven flashes. Daniel muttered under his breath, walking back toward the cradle. "Oh no, not again!" He crouched beside the hatchling, careful not to wake it, and examined the toy. The circuits inside were trembling with unstable energy, as though his earlier repair had been enough only to delay the problem. He sighed heavily, rubbing his tired eyes. "I thought I fixed you. Guess you've got more to say, huh?" The hatchling stirred slightly in its sleep, claws tightening around the toy, and gave a soft whine. Daniel hesitated. He could leave it, pretend the job was done. The hatchling would still have a faint glow to keep it calm. No one would know. No one except himself. He looked at the tiny dragon's face, peaceful yet fragile, and shook his head. "No, not good enough. You deserve better." With careful fingers, he eased the toy from its claws. The hatchling whimpered softly, and Daniel whispered, "Sure, I'll give it back soon. Promise." He opened the toy again, spreading out his tools. This time, the circuits resisted him. They sparked faintly, as if the toy itself was fighting his touch. Daniel's jaw tightened. "So that's how it's gonna be? Fine. I've dealt with worse." He leaned closer, adjusting, reworking, tracing lines of crystal with careful precision. Every time he thought he had found the problem, another piece seemed loose, another line unstable. It was as though the toy had been built to test his patience. And in truth, it had. Above him, hidden in the shadows, the Dragon Emperor watched with unblinking eyes. His guards remained silent, their wings tucked close, but even they did not know the truth. The toy was no ordinary plaything. It was a tool, an artifact designed not just for comfort but for trial. It was given to hatchlings to challenge them, to frustrate them, to teach them resilience. And tonight it served another purpose. Tonight it tested the human. Daniel's hands trembled as sparks nipped at his skin. He hissed softly, shaking his fingers, but he didn't stop. "Not gonna beat me, you little piece of junk," he muttered. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he worked, his back aching, his eyes heavy from exhaustion. Yet every time the glow returned for even a second, the image of the hatchling's joyful chirp earlier came back to him. That memory fueled him. He wanted to see it again. The hatchling stirred, half awake, and let out a soft cry as though sensing its toy was gone. Daniel glanced at it quickly. "Almost done, little one. Just give me time." His voice carried a tone of comfort, calm yet filled with determination. Slowly, the hatchling settled again, trusting him without question. The Emperor's claws pressed tighter against the stone railing above. He studied not the toy but the human. Patience, care, persistence. These were traits dragons valued, but often only in their own kind. To see them in a human, here in his hall, unsettled him. Was it weakness, or something else? His golden eyes narrowed, his thoughts hidden even from his advisors. Minutes turned to hours, or so it felt. Daniel lost track of time, his entire world shrinking down to glowing wires and stubborn shards of crystal. His hands ached, his breathing was rough, but he never stopped. He remembered Emma's broken music box, how he had sat for 3 nights fixing it because she refused to sleep without it. He remembered her smile when it finally played again. And now he wanted this hatchling to have that same smile, that same peace. At last, the toy flared bright in his hands, glowing stronger than before. Daniel froze, staring at it as though afraid it might fade again. But the light held steady, warm and alive. He let out a shaky laugh, his voice hoarse with relief. "Finally, you're fixed. For real this time." He set the toy gently back into the hatchling's claws. The little dragon opened its eyes, blinking at the bright glow, and let out a delighted trill that filled the hall. It pressed its head against Daniel's hand, tail whipping happily against the cradle. Daniel smiled tiredly, his body heavy with exhaustion but his heart strangely light. "Told you I'd fix it," he whispered. The hatchling's joy echoed through the hall, bouncing off the walls. But above, in the shadows, silence reigned. The Emperor leaned forward, his massive frame stirring the air, and spoke for the first time in hours. His voice was low, a growl that carried both weight and thought. He did not give up. One of his advisors shifted uneasily. "He wasted hours on a toy, my Emperor. That is not strength, it is foolishness." The Emperor's golden eyes blazed brighter. "Is it foolishness? Or is it devotion?" His tone silenced every tongue at once. None dared answer. Below, Daniel slumped against the wall. The hatchling curled happily against him with its glowing toy. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Good night, little one. Hope you dream better now." He thought the night was over. He thought the hardest part had passed. But he was wrong. For patience was only the first test. The true trial had not yet begun. The Emperor turned away at last, disappearing deeper into the shadows, but his thoughts lingered on the human. "This one is different," he murmured, "and I will know why." Daniel had no idea his simple act of kindness had caught the attention of the most powerful being in the Empire. No idea that his patience had just shifted the course of his life forever. The toy glowed on, steady and strong, but the shadows in the hall grew heavier. The game was not over. It had only just begun. The toy's steady glow filled the nursery hall, bathing the room in calm blue light. The hatchling purred softly, curled against the repaired sphere as though it were a treasure chest filled with dreams. Daniel sat beside it, exhausted but satisfied. His arms ached, his back throbbed, and his eyelids felt heavy, but he didn't care. The little dragon was happy, and that was all that mattered. He leaned against the wall, running a tired hand through his messy hair, whispering, "Guess I did all right." The silence of the hall was deeper now, thick and heavy. Too heavy. Daniel felt it pressing against his chest like invisible weight. He shifted uneasily, looking around. The nursery stretched wide and high, its ceiling lost in shadow, its balconies hidden in darkness. He should have felt relief, but instead, something colder crept into his bones. He couldn't explain it. The hatchling was safe, the toy was fixed, the alarms were gone. Everything should have been fine. But it wasn't. Something was wrong. The hatchling stirred, sensing his unease. It looked up at him with glowing eyes, chirping softly as though to ask what troubled him. Daniel forced a smile and patted its head gently. "It's nothing," he whispered. "Just feels like someone's here." His voice sounded too loud in the empty hall, echoing back at him like a warning. High above, in the deepest shadows, the Emperor's golden eyes gleamed. He had not left. He had been watching all along, silent and still as stone. The human's persistence had impressed him, but now came another truth: awareness. Would the mechanic sense the predator in the dark? Would he cower? Would he stand? The Emperor waited, his immense presence filling the chamber like a storm about to break. Daniel rubbed his arms, shivering despite the warmth of the room. He told himself it was just his imagination. He was tired, drained, maybe even half dreaming. But no matter how he tried to convince himself, the feeling wouldn't leave. The air felt too heavy, the silence too sharp, as though unseen eyes pierced through his every movement. His heart began to pound, slow but hard, and he swallowed nervously. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling. Is someone there?" The hatchling perked up at the sound, its small ears twitching. But there was no reply, only silence, thick and endless. Daniel shook his head, muttering, "I'm losing it. Just fix the toy, go home, sleep it off." He bent down to pack his tools, but his hands shook. He could not ignore it. Something was here. He could feel it. Then it happened. A shift in the air. A pressure so strong it made his knees buckle. Daniel gasped, clutching his chest as though the weight of a mountain had fallen upon him. The hatchling cried out in alarm, sensing the same invisible force. Its wings flared clumsily, tail lashing against the floor as it pressed closer to Daniel for safety. And then, from the shadows above, two golden eyes blazed. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. The glow was unlike anything he had ever seen, burning, powerful, ancient. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body refused to move. His legs felt like stone. His heart thundered in his chest, and cold sweat rolled down his back. The hatchling whimpered, hiding its face against his side, trembling. Slowly, impossibly, the massive shape of the Dragon Emperor shifted in the shadows. He had not spoken, yet his presence was enough to drown the entire hall in silence. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized the truth. This wasn't just any dragon. This was the Emperor, the ruler of all dragonkind, the one whispered of in stories, the one who commanded legions with a word. Daniel's mouth went dry. He wanted to speak, to explain himself, to beg forgiveness if he had broken some rule. But no words came. His voice was lost in his throat, trapped by fear. He stood frozen, staring up at the golden eyes that watched him with unreadable judgment. The Emperor leaned forward, and the shadows bent with him. His wings spread faintly, their edges glimmering like blades of night. His claws scraped against stone, the sound deep and sharp, echoing like thunder in the chamber. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was more terrifying than any roar. Daniel stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over his toolkit. The hatchling pressed closer to him, chirping nervously, but refusing to leave his side. That small gesture, this little dragon choosing to hide with him instead of running, shocked Daniel more than the Emperor's gaze. He whispered, trembling, I didn't mean any harm. I was just fixing the toy." His voice cracked on the last word, but it was the truth. It was all he had. The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed. For a moment, Daniel thought he saw fire flicker within them, a light older than the stars. Then, with slow, deliberate motion, the Emperor leaned back into the shadows. His massive form faded, swallowed once more by the dark. The crushing pressure lifted slightly, though not completely. Daniel collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath, his body shaking. Silence returned, but it was not the same silence as before. It was heavier, sharper, filled with meaning. Daniel knew what he had seen. He knew who had been watching. And though the Emperor had not spoken a word, his presence had been enough to carve fear into Daniel's soul. The hatchling nudged his arm gently, chirping as though to comfort him. Daniel forced a shaky smile, stroking its head with trembling fingers. "It's okay," he whispered, though he didn't believe it. "We're okay." His mind raced with questions. Why had the Emperor been watching? Why had he not spoken? Why had he not struck him down for daring to touch a dragon hatchling? None of it made sense. High above, hidden once more, the Emperor's voice rumbled quietly to himself, unheard by the human below. The toy was not the test. The patience was not the trial. This was the true measure. His golden eyes dimmed slightly, glowing like embers instead of fire. And he did not break. Daniel sat in silence. The hatchling curled against him once more. He told himself the night was over, that the worst had passed. But deep inside he knew the truth. Something had changed. He had been seen, truly seen. And once the Dragon Emperor had set his gaze upon someone, there was no going back. The human's fate was no longer his own. The nursery hall grew quiet again, but Daniel could not shake the weight that clung to the air. His breathing slowed, though each inhale felt sharp, like pulling cold iron into his lungs. The toy still glowed softly in the hatchling's claws, casting pale light over the floor. The little dragon was happy once more, curled close to him as though he were a shield. But Daniel's heart refused to calm. He had seen those eyes. He had felt that presence. No dream, no trick of light, no fever of exhaustion could explain it away. The Dragon Emperor had been here, watching him, judging him. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow with a trembling hand. He wanted to convince himself it was over, that whatever had just happened was finished, but his gut told him otherwise. You don't walk away from a meeting with a king of monsters, even if the king never spoke a single word. The hatchling chirped sleepily, pressing its small head against his arm. The gesture made him smile faintly despite his fear. "You don't know what kind of trouble you've gotten me into," he whispered. His voice was soft, almost playful, but it shook with unease. The hatchling blinked at him, innocent, trusting, unaware of the danger its emperor's gaze had placed upon the human who dared to touch dragonkin. Daniel stood slowly, gathering his tools with careful hands. He felt as though any sudden movement might shatter the fragile silence and bring the Emperor crashing down from the shadows again. He packed the last wrench, slung his kit over his shoulder, and glanced at the hatchling. "All right, little one," he murmured. "Time to go back to sleep." But when he stepped toward the door, he froze. 2 dragon sentinels stood at the entrance. He hadn't heard them arrive, hadn't even sensed their approach. Yet there they were, massive figures clad in dark armor that gleamed faintly in the toy's blue light. Their eyes glowed like embers, unblinking, fixed on him. Daniel's chest tightened. They had not come for the hatchling. They had come for him. The hatchling chirped nervously, hiding the glowing toy beneath its wings. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet the guard's gaze. I fixed it," he said, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "It's fine now. No harm done." The words sounded weak even to him. The sentinels did not answer. Instead, they stepped aside, creating a path through the doorway. An invitation or a command. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. His instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The Emperor's presence still lingered in the air like a shadow that reached everywhere. If he ran, he wouldn't make it 10 steps. With no choice, Daniel walked forward, each step heavy with dread. The hatchling tried to follow, but one sentinel lowered its wing gently, blocking the way. The baby squealed in protest, scratching at the stone floor, but Daniel turned back quickly and raised his hand. "Stay," he whispered. "It's all right. Stay with your toy." His throat tightened at the lie. He had no idea if it would be all right. The hatchling pressed its face against the toy, watching with wide eyes as Daniel disappeared beyond the door. The hall beyond was darker, colder. Torches lined the walls, but their flames were strange, burning silver instead of red, casting sharp shadows that seemed alive. The sentinels flanked him, their heavy claws clicking against stone, their wings brushing the air with each slow step. Daniel felt small between them, like prey walking into the jaws of a predator. Finally, the path opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in blackness, the walls carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. At the far end, seated upon a throne of obsidian stone, the Dragon Emperor revealed himself fully. His golden eyes burned brighter than the torches, and his massive form dwarfed everything around him. His scales shimmered with threads of fire, his claws dug grooves into the throne, and his wings curled behind him like storms frozen in time. Daniel stopped in his tracks. His knees wanted to buckle, but he forced himself to stand. He had never seen anything so terrifying, so majestic, so utterly beyond human understanding. The Emperor said nothing for a long time. The silence was heavier than chains, heavier than mountains. Then, at last, his voice rolled across the chamber, deep, ancient, a sound that seemed to come not only from his throat but from the stone itself. "You fix what is broken." Daniel blinked, stunned. The voice shook his bones. He swallowed hard, trying to form words. "Why, yes, I fixed it." His voice cracked, but he managed to speak. "You calm what cries," the Emperor continued, his golden gaze unblinking. "And you do not turn away from need." Daniel's lips parted, but no answer came. He didn't know if the Emperor expected him to speak. He didn't know if speaking would doom him or save him. The Emperor leaned forward, and the chamber seemed to shrink around him. "Why?" The single word thundered louder than 1,000 roars. Daniel flinched, his heart racing. Why? Why had he fixed it? Why had he stayed? Why had he comforted a creature that wasn't his own? His mind scrambled, searching for the right answer. At last, the only truth he had spilled from his lips. "Because it was hurting." His voice shook, but he spoke clearly this time. "I couldn't just leave it like that. I had to help." Silence followed. The Emperor's eyes burned into him, searching, weighing, peeling back every layer of his soul. Then, slowly, the great dragon leaned back, his expression unreadable. The sentinels did not move. The flames on the walls flickered once, as though holding their breath. Daniel stood frozen, waiting for judgment. Finally, the Emperor spoke again, his voice softer but no less powerful. "The weak cling to pride. The cruel cling to power. But you gave patience. You gave care. Without thought of gain." Daniel's breath caught. He dared to hope, but he dared not speak. The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, then softened by the smallest fraction. "You are seen," he rumbled, "and you will be watched." Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know if that was mercy or a threat. Perhaps it was both. The Emperor raised one massive claw and gestured toward the door. The sentinels stepped forward at once, guiding Daniel back toward the hall. His legs moved on their own, weak but steady, his heart pounding with confusion. He had survived. Somehow he had survived. As he passed through the doorway, the Emperor's final words followed him, carried like thunder on the wind. "Do not break." The torches dimmed behind him. The chamber disappeared into shadow. The weight of the Emperor's gaze lingered in his soul like a brand. Daniel returned to the nursery, where the hatchling still clutched its glowing toy, waiting for him. It chirped happily when it saw him, as if nothing had happened. Daniel knelt, forcing a smile, stroking the little dragon's head with trembling fingers. "It's fixed," he whispered. "You're safe." But his eyes darted to the dark ceiling above, to the place where golden eyes had once burned. He knew the truth now. He had not simply fixed a toy. He had stepped into the Emperor's sight. And once the Dragon Emperor had seen you, you could never hide again. The human mechanic left the nursery that night with more than tools in his kit. He carried a secret, a weight, and a silent judgment that would follow him forever. And somewhere in the darkness, the Emperor's voice rumbled quietly. The story of this human has only just begun.